وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat Show. Friday evenings now has become my meeting time with the viewers of ITV. I don't consider the program, to be honest. Friday evenings is an opportunity for me to meet with all the viewers of ITV throughout the length and breadth of South Africa, Southern Africa, and wherever you may be watching the program from. I know people in various parts of the world, they tune in via the streaming and they watch the program. Here in South Africa as well, I hear from time to time from different people that, you know what, we were not near a TV set and we really wanted to watch the program. We wanted to, catch a particular interview. And as a result, we decided that, okay, we'll tune in via the streaming and the stream link and watch it live on the internet. So however you may be watching, wherever you may be watching, we say to you, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. For those who don't understand Arabic and who are not familiar with that message of warmth and that message of welcome and that message of hospitality, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, basically is a term that is expressed by Arabs to show hospitality, that you are most welcome. And we would like you to come in and we would like you to make yourself comfortable. So when we say to you that ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, we say that let's drop the formalities. Let's consider that we are talking to one another. We are interacting with one another. And there are different talks, there are different interactions, there are different discussions. People talk about a variety of things, neutral aspects, mundane issues, political issues, sports. It's amazing these days, how much people talk about sports. Somebody told me, which is the biggest religion in the world? And before I could answer, he said, it's not Christianity, it's not Islam, it's sports. The amount of people, followers that sport has. If you take soccer, for example, rugby maybe a bit more limited to certain nations, South Africa, England, Australia, New Zealand, France, Argentina. But soccer, for example, golf, those are some of the more popular sports, and they have a very broad-based appeal across the globe. And people are religiously fanatic about it, if I can use that expression. Like a person would be disciplined. A person who is religious, for example, a Muslim, he would be disciplined, performing salah 5 times a day, adhering to the rules and the regulations, the times and the guidelines. Similarly, a person who is a sport fanatic, I'm not very clued up with the times and when these matches feature and all of that. I used to follow sport, to be honest, when I was a younger person, when I was in my school-going days and a little thereafter. But then again, but thereafter, life took me along a path where I just didn't have the time, to be honest. And I also started to develop an understanding that there are greater priorities in life. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have no interest whatsoever. I know people who do follow here and there, but people who become totally absorbed, people who are totally consumed. So if Manchester United loses that weekend, your whole weekend is spoiled. Now your wife is to bear the brunt and your children will be snapped at. And Monday morning, you'll be paupers at work. Or worse still, now you go to the masjid to perform salah and you're talking about, whether that guy should have played or whether somebody else should have been substituted and whether the coach must go or the coach must stay and all of those kind of things just outside the house of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. When you're supposed to be constructive in your workplace, now what you're doing, you're talking about sport. You're talking about a football player who's making millions of pounds per week and doesn't give 1 cent to you, doesn't benefit you in any way. I understand people need to relax from time to time, fair enough. But, the way people get consumed. And there's also very constructive ways of relaxing yourself. Nonetheless, I just drifted for a moment there, giving sport as an example. So yes, people talk about different things. Politics, they talk about sport, they talk about mundane issues, they talk about business, they talk about ching-ching, they talk about money. When people talk about money, they have a passion and they talk about money with a great passion. But in the end, when you're talking about deen, when you're talking about religion, when you're talking about Allah, and when you're talking about Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when you're talking about Sahaba, when you're talking about pious predecessors, then it's a different ball game, if I can use that expression. It's a different discussion altogether. It has a different flavor, a different enjoyment, a different spirituality, obviously, a different ecstasy, especially for those whose hearts are inclined. So when we get to meet, sometimes we're discussing political issues, and it's necessary. It's part of our life as believers. Sometimes we're discussing financial issues, we're discussing issues pertaining to the country. But many a times we are talking about deen, we are talking about Allah, we are talking about Rasulullah, we are talking about the solution that Islam has for the problems of mankind. Yes, in the end of the day, think about it. The problems that we have as individuals, the problems that we have as communities, the problems that we have as countries, the problems that we have as a globe, as humanity, worldwide, we'll find the solutions in Kitabullah. Okay, coming up this evening on the program, inshallah, we commence with our dua for the week. We focus on Hidayah and Guidance. Then we move on to our Hadith discussion for this week. We'll be focusing on the bounties of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. In our Tafseer discussion, we talk about how we will appear before Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah, totally exposed. And then we move on to our Seerah discussion. Last week we spoke about the marriage of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's parents. Today we talk about the demise of his father Abdullah. In our marital segment for the week, last week we spoke about the first night. I'll continue a little bit on that this week, and then we talk about appreciating your wife. That's the topic for this evening. And then finally, we talk about the blessings that the guest brings into the home of the host as part of our sunnah for the week, where we're focusing on the sunnahs of hospitality, of entertaining guests. That's the lineup. You can interact with us repeatedly throughout the program. The Twitter handle will appear on your screen, as well as the Facebook details and the email address.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Turn to the book of Allah. Turn to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and therein we will find the solution to our problems. At times we drift. Even the most religious amongst us, even the most educated amongst us, even the most disciplined amongst us, we get somewhat depressed, we get somewhat demoralized, we get somewhat deflated, we get somewhat down, we start feeling down, we start feeling, hey, where is there going to be an opening for me? But remember, Allah says, Inna ma'al usri yusra, Inna ma'al usri yusra. After difficulty, there will always be ease. And the solution to all problems, come back to the path of Allah, come back to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no human on the face of planet Earth, from those who lived, those who are living, and those who will live, irrespective of their closeness to Allah, irrespective of their profile, irrespective of their power or kingdom, irrespective of their wealth. No human who had no problems, who had no difficulties, who had no challenges. Every human has his issues. That's why they say, don't envy the next man's life too much. You don't know what are the issues in his life. He may look like he's smiling all the time. He may look like everything is hunky-dory. He may look like everything's going well for him. Sometimes you say, wow. Not necessarily, from a jealous perspective. Sometimes you say, look at that man. Everything he touches, it just turns to gold. Everything he does, it just works out for him. Yeah, it may happen for some people. But many a times, you may assume a lot of things based on the apparent. But what's happening behind those scenes, you don't know. Maybe that man, everything for him in the business place turns to gold. But at home, his wife is terminally ill. His child is got some issue or the other. Maybe at home, or maybe himself, he's got some health problems, and they are so severe that he wishes he could give up all his wealth, all his success. It may be that person has got looks, or that person has got whatever. You may think that makes that person very privileged and very fortunate. So be content with your lot. I think the big problem that we have these days, we're not content. And in our pursuit for more, and for more, and for more, and for more, we then complicate our lives. And we trip over ourselves. And we bring more problems upon us. On the one hand, I know I've just said that every human will have problems. There's no two ways about it. Every human will have problems in his or her life. But the more you pursue because you're not content, not pursuing because of necessity, because of what is required, pursuing within reasonable limits, you're pursuing for the sake of pursuing. I need more, I need more, I need more. Then what happens is you complicate your own life. I met somebody this week. Actually, I spoke to somebody on the phone this week. And the man comes from one of the more well-known professions. And he said to me something that really hit me. It hit me hard. He said, you know what? I'm tired of living this kind of an existence. And this person is well known in his profession. He's known to do very well in his profession. And I said to him, but why? What's your frustration? He said, I've come to understand that all I'm doing in my life is selling my time. Selling my time. I'm working these long hours. And in reality, I'm just selling my time to my clients. One after the other. More and more of my time is going. In the end, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Besides my work, who am I? What do I enjoy? Do I actually have a connection left with my family, with my children, with my friends, with myself? You lose yourself. And the very next day, I met another person, a businessman. And he said, you know, my business, Allah has blessed me. It has flourished. And he said something to me that caught me by surprise, because very few businessmen say this. I normally tease car dealers especially. My neighbor and my colleague is a car dealer. And whenever I tell him how's business, he says, okay, make dua, a bit slow. I say, you car dealers, it's always a bit slow. It's always a bit slow. I've never heard a car dealer saying that, shukr, it's going very well. It's always a bit slow. But, but this businessman, he said to me, my business is thriving. It's pumping. It's gone too big. It's gone too big. And I'm asking myself the question, he says to me, that how much of this business am I going to allow, how much of myself am I going to allow the business to consume? He says, I'm working long hours. I'm not spending time with the family. I'm not spending time with the children. Fine. I had all just these justifications along the way that, I need to set up myself financially so I don't have to stretch to anybody else my hand. Then you say to yourself after that, no, I need to set up myself a little beyond that so my children can be comfortable. And then you will say to yourself, well, I need to set my children up so that they can set their children up, and there's never an end. He says, and I thought to myself, this is it. Now I need to branch off. I need to create an exit strategy for me. And he's not very old. I would put this person probably in his early 40s. And he said to me, listen, I'm already thinking of an exit strategy because I would rather enjoy my life. I would rather have greater quality in my life. Now, I know it's not realistic for every person. Every person can't work just a few hours a day. They can't create an exit strategy. You need a solid financial foundation in order to talk about creating some sort of an exit strategy. There are those who are very bold, who said, you know what, I'd rather live a much more simpler life. I'm willing to take that plunge. I'm willing to make that sacrifice and bring it down to a much, much lower level in order to in order to scrape it thin and live a more content life, a better quality life, but in order to push myself less harder. But the point I'm trying to make here is that catch yourself sometimes. We're just running and running and running. And as a result, we're bringing more complications upon ourselves. We're bringing more problems upon ourselves. We don't take care of our health. We start to neglect our close and dear ones. We're pursuing too much the career, too much the business. I understand the frustrations. There are those people who are doing it because of necessity, really. Traveling 2 hours to work, 2 hours from work, pushing themselves. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, how much am I going to allow of myself to be consumed? What will be left thereafter? And at some point, you have to give yourself a chance to lead a quality life. Okay, welcome back. We now move on to our dua segment for this week. And the dua that I want to discuss is a dua that you may have heard being made many times by the different ai*imma of the masajid. And you may have heard on various platforms. Allahumma hdina wahdi bina waj'alna sababan liman ihtada. Allahumma hdina wahdi bina waj'alna sababan liman ihtada. Loosely translated, O Allah, guide us, then guide by means of us, and make us a means, make us a sabab, a pathway towards the guidance of others. Now, this speaks volumes about the approach and the attitude of a believer towards the concept of Hidayah and guidance. Firstly, we believe that every human has been given basic guidance. Therefore, you'll be held accountable. If you were not given basic guidance, you will not be held accountable. Basic guidance to determine what is right and what is wrong, also coupled with what Allah Ta'ala has sent to supplement that basic inner mechanism to help us determine and to guide us. However, there's added guidance. One is you can tell a person, here's a map and find your way. You've given the person the map. The person ought to have the knowledge to read the map. The person ought to know how to find his way. And if he doesn't find his way, you can hold him accountable. But another is you can actually help that person. You say, follow me. Or even better, I'll take you to your destination. Those are different levels now of guidance. So we're seeking greater levels of guidance from Allah Ta'ala. That, oh Allah, take us by our hands and lead us to the straight path. And hold our hands and keep us on the straight path so that we don't divert and we don't lose course. And take us towards our destination. So Allahumma hdina. Firstly, we need to be rightly guided. And therefore, you also need to be concerned about yourself before you're concerned about others. But it doesn't mean that until you haven't reached perfection, that you cannot be concerned about others. Because that process of perfecting yourself is an ongoing one. So, whilst you give priority to yourself, you have to do the two simultaneously. Receiving your own guidance and trying to impart guidance. Why I say this? Because sometimes people feel, who am I to be encouraging others to do good or forbidding them from evil? In the end, I must look at myself. But actually encouraging good and forbidding evil, when you talk, you're firstly talking to yourself, even though that person is the addressee, because your lips are closest to your ears. So it's a means of your own reformation. Da'wat, calling towards Allah Ta'ala, Amar bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, it's a means of your own reformation. It's a means of your own Islah. So what happens is this, that we must work on ourselves, but at the same time, we mustn't use that as an excuse not to assist others in uplifting themselves towards guidance. As long as we don't become so absorbed in helping others that we forget ourselves, because we're the first priority. So we say, oh Allah, you guide us. Firstly, we need guidance. We need salvation. We need to be saved. Wahdi bina, and then guide others by means of us. That also is not something that we can accomplish or achieve. It's something that Allah bestows upon us as a bounty. Yes, indeed, it's a bounty of Allah to be chosen to be a means of hidayah and guidance for others. You see, a person can be, on the flip side, on the opposite of this very discussion, a person can be misguided himself, which is bad, and a means of misguidance for others, which is even worse. ضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا عَنْ سَوَاءِ السَّبِيلِ, as Allah Ta'ala makes mention in the 6th juz of the Quran Kareem in Surah Ma'idah, that they are misguided and they misguide others as a result of their misguidance. They become a means of the misguidance of other people. So we say, oh Allah, guide us so that we're not misguided in terms of ourselves. Then guide us so that we don't become a means of the misguidance of others. Then one step further, make us a means of the guidance of others. Because لَأَن يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُّلًا وَاحِدٍ. If one man receives guidance and you are the means, it is better for you than red camels. And red camels was the Rolls Royce of the time in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's era. And it's better for you than this world and its bounties and its pleasures. Because that person's good deeds now will earn you a perpetual reward because you were a means of guidance. It becomes a perpetual investment for you. It becomes a thawab jariyah for you to become the means of guidance for someone else. So it's a dua that we ought to learn. And learning one verbally, we make it and Allah Ta'ala accept. But the other is also, it's a concept that we need to internalize. And it's a concept that we need to personalize. Seeking our own guidance, seeking to play a part in the guidance of others, and seeking to become a means for the guidance of other people. Allahumma hdina wahdi bina waj'alna sababan liman ihtada. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We continue now with our hadith discussion. A quick recap of last week's hadith that we discussed. The first was from Nasa'i, where Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had said, Al-mu'minu man aminahu an-nasu ala dima'ihim wa amwalihim. A true believer is that person that other people are safe from him in respect of their lives and in respect of their wealth. And we spoke about this at length last week. We said that, for example, even on the road, don't drive recklessly, where you put your own life in jeopardy and the life of other people in jeopardy. So people are not safe in respect to their lives when it comes to you. And that becomes a deficiency for you as a believer, according to the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, with regards to their wealth. You know, we hear today about widespread discussion about Muslims bring people down, and this was unheard of before. You know, it was unheard of for a Muslim to be unscrupulous or to be dishonest in his business dealings. But today, unfortunately, it has become so. Brothers doing brothers down in inheritance, brothers, marginalizing sisters and usurping them of their rights, etc. And then we also discussed a hadith, the second hadith from Bukhari, Al-Muslimu man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. That a Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hands other Muslims are safe. And we said, let's not judge other people. Let's ask ourselves, to what extent are other people saved from my physical abuse? Physical abuse. Whether it be my own wife, whether it be my own children, whether it be my own students. Physical abuse is unacceptable. Corporal punishment, or maybe that's a wrong word also. Some discipline, physical discipline within the parameters of Sharia, as per the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's a different matter altogether. Different topic for a different day. But what I'm saying is, physical abuse, it's a no-brainer. It's a non-starter. It's just not acceptable. Full stop. Then verbal. And I mentioned last week, how many people are not the victims of our slander, our backbiting, our insinuations, our gossip, our insults, and the list goes on and on and on. So isn't that then a deficiency in our iman? وَالْمُهَاجِرُ مَنْ هَجَرَ مَا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. And a muhajir is the one who abandons all that Allah has forbidden. The Sahaba had achieved great distinction when they had emigrated from Mecca to Medina. They had achieved great distinction as a result of that. We can achieve distinction. We don't necessarily have to emigrate from one land to another. We need to emigrate from one lifestyle to another. From a lifestyle of sin, from a lifestyle of disobedience to a lifestyle of obedience to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. The first hadith that I want to discuss this evening is mentioned by Ibn Hibban, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had said, لا تنتف الشيب فإنه نور يوم القيامة ومن شاب شيبة في الإسلام كتب له بها حسنة وحط عنه بها خطيئة ورفع له بها درجة. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, do not pluck out grey hair. Indeed, there will be a nur, a light for you on the day of Qiyamah. He who ages with grey hair in Islam, then for each grey hair, a good deed will be written. A sin will be wiped out, and he will be elevated by one rank. Subhanallah. Today, when we start greying, then, we feel a bit embarrassed, especially if you're young like me. In between here, the grey hairs are starting to appear. And the wife will tease a bit that now you're becoming a doho, you're becoming an old man. And, you start feeling embarrassed about, hey, now I'm starting to look a bit old, etc. You can dye it, the permissible colors that are allowed to be dyed. There's no doubt about that. That is established also from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But do not pluck out grey hair out of embarrassment. Why? Because firstly, it's an honor for you to grow old in Islam. You are aging whilst in the state of Iman, whilst under the umbrella of Islam. That's an honor for you. And that grey hair will be a nur for you, a light on the day of Qiyamah. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, he who ages with grey hair in Islam, then for each grey hair, a good deed will be written. For each grey hair, a good deed will be written, a sin will be wiped off, and he will be elevated by one rank. So imagine if the whole beard then becomes grey. If the whole head becomes grey, if the body hairs become grey, then naturally that will hold you in good stead. And we know that if a person passes away and he's fully white, he's fully greyed, then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala looks at that person with greater mercy, because it's a sign that person has aged. And that person has aged in Islam. That person has aged in Islam. So don't be too negative about grey hair. I'm not saying it's not permissible. It's totally fine, totally permissible, especially for those who start greying at a very early age. That you dye it because you want to look a little younger, and especially for the purposes of your marriage, and that it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely above board. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But do not pluck it and do not start becoming embarrassed about it, because it's an honor for you. It's an honor for you. The second hadith which I want to discuss, this is mentioned by Abu Nu'aym. He says, "An Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن لله تعالى أقواما يختصهم بالنعم لمنافع العباد ويقرها فيهم ما بذلوها فإذا منعوها نزعها منهم فحولها إلى غيرهم." Indeed, Allah blesses certain people with special bounties for the benefit of other people. Indeed, Allah blesses certain people with special bounties for the benefit of other people. As long as they benefit others, Allah continues His bounties upon them. But when they stop benefiting others, Allah takes back His bounties from them and transfers it to others. Subhanallah, what a hadith. Sometimes we feel, yeah, because I got money, they all take advantage of me. Maybe Allah gave you money so that you could be of benefit to them. As long as you're benefiting them, Allah will continue to give you. You stop benefiting them, Allah will stop giving you. Maybe Allah gave you knowledge so you could benefit them. You stop benefiting them, Allah will close the taps of knowledge and wisdom. Maybe Allah gave you whatever you have as a special bounty so that you could share and benefit others. Consider that a privilege for you. Consider that an honor for you. Don't look at it as something that you need to be now very exclusive about. Something that you need to be stingy over. That, hey, what do you want now? Why are you cringing on my space? And why are you encroaching on my space? Why are you coming too close? Why always you want to know about my bounty? And you know, this is what I've been blessed with, and let me enjoy it. Many times you've been blessed with something because Allah is merely making you a means to benefit others with that bounty. And as a result, you also benefit from that bounty. When you stop benefiting them, it will stop coming to you. So as long as you continue to benefit them, it will continue to come to you. Sometimes you may think, well, I have a thriving business. And as a result, I'm giving this Darul Uloom, that masjid, that madrasa, that institute, that NGO. I'm giving to Gaza, I'm giving here, I'm giving Syria. And you say, wow, look at this. If I close the tap here, they won't function. Maybe if you close the tap there, you'll stop functioning. Allah is keeping you functioning because Allah is using you as a means to benefit them. If you stop benefiting them, Allah will create somebody else, or Allah will make it, bless somebody else with that bounty, will become a means of benefiting them. So let's understand that these bounties are from Allah. They're not from us. We are merely temporary custodians. Yes, we benefit ourselves via them, but we should benefit the creation of Allah wa ta'ala. And we shouldn't consider it our favor upon them. We should consider it the favor of Allah upon us. The favor of Allah upon us. May Allah wa ta'ala grant us that understanding.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We move on to the Tafseer segment, and I have selected a verse which I was discussing in the week, and I thought that I would really like to discuss it once again with those who may not have heard it, and because it got me thinking so much, and it shocked me also, and it needs to wake us all up. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, it's a verse of Surah Al-An'am, towards the end of the 7th juz, وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَ فُرَادًا كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. Allah says, you will come to us alone, totally exposed, like the time we created you initially. Meaning that the day your mother gave birth to you, you came out totally naked, totally exposed, alone. No hat, no shoes, not a stitch of clothing on your body. That is how you will be resurrected on the day of Qiyamah. Totally naked. The hadith is mentioned, naked, uncircumcised, no hat, no shoes, no stitch of clothing. Everything that you took pride in this world, everything that you accumulated, you possessed, acquired, you earned, everything you leave behind. It all comes to an end. It's all destroyed when the world comes to an end. So your Louis Vuitton shoes, or your Prada bag, or your Rolex watch, or your Mont Blanc pen, or your Ray-Ban sunglasses, or whatever it may be, all of that stays behind. When you're in front of Allah, you're totally exposed. And when you're exposed, you're vulnerable. What will you have on that day through which you can try and gain salvation? Only your good deeds. Only your good deeds. So Allah says, وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَا فُرَادًا كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَتَرَكْتُمْ مَا خَوَّلْنَاكُمْ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِكُمْ. Everything is behind your back. Everything you've left in the world. وَمَا نَرَى مَعَكُمْ شُفَعَاءَكُمُ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُمْ أَنَّكُمْ فِيكُمْ شُرَكَاء. Those who are idolaters and polytheists in the world, they used to say, yeah, well, if we're in trouble, we'll call our idol, we'll call this guru, we'll call this one, we'll call that, mentor of ours. Allah says, look, if it's on that level of shirk, when you made shirk with Allah, so where are those deities? They can't help you. If you were not a person who committed shirk, but you were a person in this world, you considered yourself independent. You had contacts, you knew people, it was just a matter of picking up the phone. I can get info at the tap of a button. In front of Allah, you are totally exposed on the day of Qiyamah. Totally exposed. لَقَدْ تَقَطَّعَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَضَلَّ عَنْكُمْ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَزْعُمُونَ. Allah says, listen, all that big talk of yours, all those hopes, all those things you thought about in the day of in this world, that this will happen, nothing will help you on the day of Qiyamah. All that can help you now are your good deeds. And obviously, the mercy of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the blessings of Allah and the clemency of Allah. Now, a verse of that nature ought to make us realize that that's where I'm heading. Each one of us. Aisha radiallahu anha once asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that, Ya Rasulullah, if everyone is naked, wouldn't people start looking at each other? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, oh Aisha, on that day, matters will be so serious, people won't want to look at each other. People won't want to look at each other. They'll have no time for it. I mean, it's not like a nudist beach, right? If somebody goes onto a nudist beach, even if you're a pious person with a flowing beard and a flowing kurta, then you'd get tempted to just look a bit. But let me give you an example. If you're in a plane and the plane is crashing, at that point, if some woman strips there, you'll have no inclination at looking. At that point, you're worried about your life. At that point, you're reading kalima. Qiyamah will be much more severe. So nobody will be looking at each other. Now imagine standing before Allah, totally exposed. You got nothing there. You don't have your bank account. You don't have your house for shelter. You don't have your car for escape. You don't have your friends to lean on. You don't have your spouse for support. You don't have your children to rely on. The only thing you've got is your good deeds. Now the question we need to ask ourselves, how much have we prepared for that day? To what extent? And I tweeted along these lines in the week as well. I tweeted and I said, we will stand before Allah totally exposed and alone. Totally exposed and alone. Are we ready? Are we ready for that moment? Are we preparing for that moment to meet Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala? Do we have the good deeds that we can present before Allah on the day of Qiyamah? Because when you go into the grave also, you still got those few sheets, but that's it. Those sheets will wither after a while. Those planks will disintegrate. Even your body in the grave will disintegrate. The only thing that will keep you company in your grave will be your good deeds. So many times in life, we need to just say to ourselves, halt, stop, right there, and ask yourself the question, where am I going? My aqeedah and my belief tells me and reminds me that I'm going towards the akhirat. I'm going towards Allah. And if I'm going towards Allah, then to what extent have I prepared? To what extent have I prepared? To what extent have I prepared? May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We now move on to our Seerah discussion for this evening. Last week we spoke about the marriage of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's parents, Abdullah and Amina. We explained that when Abdullah had reached the age of marriage, as per the custom of that time, not the age of marriage as per the custom of these times, then his father sent a proposal to Medina Munawwara. Remember Abdul Muttalib, his mother came from Medina. When we spoke about the life story of Hashim, that's Abdul Muttalib's father. Hashim was traveling, and on his way to Medina, he got married, and then he went on and he continued, and in Gaza he passed away. And then Abdul Muttalib was brought back to Makkah by his uncle. So Abdul Muttalib sent now the proposal to his mother's family for Wahab bin Abd Manaf's daughter Amina. But Amina was now living under the guardianship of her uncle Wahab. But Abdul Muttalib sent a dual proposal. He sent a proposal for Amina, Wahab's niece, to marry his son Abdullah, and for Hala, Wahab's daughter, to marry him, Abdul Muttalib himself. So father and son got married in the same ceremony. And Abdullah's marriage to Amina was consummated and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, and Abdullah's marriage to Hala was consummated, and Hamza radiallahu an was born. And hence Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Hamza radiallahu an were uncle and nephew, but they were more or less of same age, and they were milk brothers as well. They were suckled by the same woman. And we spoke about how Abdullah on his way, when he met this woman, Fatima bint Mur, who was a Jewish woman, well known, well versed in the scriptures. And when she saw that nur of Nubuwah on him, she wanted him to be intimate with her. He declined. And then when he came back, she saw that nur had been transferred, and she asked him what happened. And he explained that he got married, and she said, look, I'm not an immoral woman. I didn't want to just commit adultery. I was so overcome by the desire to have the nur of Nubuwah transferred to my belly and transferred to my bosom. Now today we talk about the demise of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's father Abdullah. He didn't live for much longer thereafter. He then went on a trade journey with a caravan that was bound to Syria, and on their way back he became ill. And because he was not well, he decided to stay over in Medina to try and recover, because Medina was on the way as they were traveling back to Makkah. When the trade caravan reached Makkah and Abdullah was not there. Now remember, Abdullah was the favorite son of Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib was very anxious, very worried. They naturally informed him, your son took ill, so he stayed over in Medina. Immediately Abdul Muttalib sent his eldest son Harith, that go and see, how's your brother, and bring him back. But when Harith reached Medina, that's when he got the news that Abdullah had already passed away. He had passed away a month earlier, or rather he had passed away after a suffering and illness for about a month. And he was buried in Nabi's house in Madinatul Munawwara. And now Harith, totally forlorn, he came back to Makkah, and he had to convey this news to his father Abdul Muttalib, to his sister-in-law Amina, and naturally they were all very dejected, sad, indescribable sorrow. And the scholars say, with unanimity, that when Abdullah passed away, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was still in the womb of his mother. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had not seen his father. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not born. Abdullah did not see his son, and the son, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did not see Abdullah. What was his age at the time of his demise? Some say 30, others say 25, others say 28, some say 18. And Hafiz ibn Hajar Asqalani says the most favored opinion is he was 18 at the time of his demise. So he got married just before that, and he passed away not long after his marriage. His estate didn't contain of much. He had 5 camels, a few goats, and he had 1 slave. The slave's name was Barakah. She was also known as Ayman, and she came to play a big part in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you'll see that she features prominently in the Seerah and in many discussions of the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Okay, we now move on to our marriage segment for the week. Last week we spoke about the first night. No Kama Sutra stuff. We just spoke about one very important point. I remember, just to digress for a moment on a lighter note, a few years ago I was invited by, I think, one of the universities, and they were having an awareness week, and they said they were talking about marriage. And the topic that they allocated to me was first night. And they genuinely expected me to get into the heavy stuff. And when I didn't, they got disappointed. But there's so many other aspects to talk about besides the so-called heavy stuff. There's an appropriate place and an appropriate time with the appropriate person in the appropriate context. It's necessary knowledge which you need to gain in the right way. But the point I wanted to make for last week was, and I want to re-emphasize that point, and for those who missed it, make mention of it again, that many times, especially men, feel that the marriage has to be consummated on the first night. It's not necessary. Many times there are a lot of stresses that lead into the week of the marriage, getting ready for the function, especially on the side of the wife, having to pack up at her mother's house, getting all her stuff ready, because she's making the khrut trek, she's making the big move. You parking off. Maybe you're moving from your mother's house into a flat or whatever, but you're much more relaxed as compared to she is. And then on top of that, she's now with a foreign person, strange person, strange bed, strange room, strange bathroom, strange house. It takes time to climatize. It takes time to familiarize yourself with the surroundings and to do the deed, so to speak, right then and there. is not necessary. And sometimes don't force the issue. You'll actually compromise that moment for yourself. And you put unnecessary pressure on both yourself and your spouse. Spend some time. I'm not saying prolong it unnecessarily. You got the license now, so don't let the car lie in the garage. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you have to rush things and you have to hurry things unnecessarily. Take time to get to know each other a little bit, a day or 2, 3 days, a week maybe, and then let things progress from there onwards. It's an important point because on that particular night, many times by the time you get done, it's late in the night and it's just not conducive. Now this week I want to talk about, and I want to address men, about appreciating your wife. Now when we say appreciate your wife, many men out there will say, I do. If she asks me, I'll tell her, yeah, I appreciate you do X, Y, and Z. No. Women are different. They're wired differently. There's that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus or something like that. Women are wired differently. That's the reality. It's not an insult to them, nor is it an insult to us. Allah has created us differently. And we are meant to complement each other, not to compete with each other. So they don't feel appreciated in the way that you would think that they would feel appreciated. You would have to understand what it means for them to feel appreciated and then adopt those ways to make them feel appreciated. Let me give you an example. Sometimes a man will feel, so what's a big deal in a chocolate? I'm in a chocolate. I have provided this woman with a house. I have given her a car. I take her for holiday. She's got a credit card. And here she tells me, you never bring me a chocolate. Or you never ever buy me flowers. That's how a woman is. She's sensitive, but her sensitivity is not necessarily a negative thing. Her sensitivity is part of the way she's made up. It's part of her composition. So they want to feel appreciated. If she dressed well that day and you didn't notice, she's going to be offended. You taking the time to notice that she dressed well or she made a nice dish, that is how you make her feel appreciated. You passing that compliment every now and again. Every day you come home, she's feeding you. I'm not saying every day you must now, thank her elaborately. But every now and again, I really enjoyed the meal today. Hey, the lunch you made for me today was delicious. Hey, you know what? I shared my lunch with somebody in the office. And they told me, wow, it's so nice. It's so delicious. My friends that we invited last week, they mentioned to me afterwards, they really enjoyed the function. They really enjoyed what you had prepared. That's how you make a woman feel appreciated. Now, we as men, we may take these things for granted. We may feel, Ahmed, come. She ought to know these things. She knows I appreciate her. I do thank her once in a while. No. You need to appreciate her in a way that she requires you to appreciate her, not in a way that you feel is adequate, in a way that she requires. Understand her needs to feel appreciated. Human beings need to feel appreciated, even if you're married for donkey's years, even if you're married for 30 years, even if it's a doho and dohi that are married for many, many years. You need to make each other feel appreciated. So it may be the chocolate every now and again, the back rub every now and again, that compliment every now and again, that flowers every now and again. Whatever it is, you know your wife better than anyone else, but make her feel appreciated.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Right, we now move on to our final feature of tonight's program. We continue with our sunnah for the week. We have been discussing the different sunnats of eating and entertaining guests. We spoke previously about going out of your way the first day, having an obligation for 3 days. Beyond that, then whatever you do is optional, and you'll get rewarded for that. We spoke about the guest also, not criticizing the host unnecessarily and not being petty and not being too difficult and too demanding. Now, there's one hadith that I want to discuss this week for this particular feature. It will give us a lot of encouragement in terms of hosting people. It's a narration of Kanzul Ummal, narrated by Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. He mentions that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when a visitor comes along with his own sustenance, and when that a visitor comes along with his own sustenance, and when he leaves with the sins of people. In other words, when he comes to your house, although apparently you providing for him, he's come with his own sustenance, because that food of yours that he's eating, Allah has decreed for him. Allah has decreed that it would be granted for you, for him to consume. You become the means. So he's come with his own sustenance, technically speaking, because Allah has decreed that it would come to you, but it's for him. It was written for him. That's why many times people will say it was in your taqdeer. It was in your taqdeer. Although it was by my house, it was cooked in my house, it was bought by my money, with my money, but it was in your taqdeer. But he leaves with the sins of the people of the house. Because you entertain him, you honor him as your guest, becomes a means of your sins being washed away. So don't worry too much about the financial cost, because in reality Allah has already provided to you for him. Allah has provided to you for him. But by you allowing yourself to become that means and entertaining that person for the pleasure of Allah, it becomes a means of your sins being wiped out. So that should motivate us to entertain people for the pleasure of Allah. That brings us to the end of another edition of this program. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala accept. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the tawfiq of making amal. Always a pleasure to be on the program and in the company of all the viewers out there. Until we meet again, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
فالمسجد الأقصى ما زال يدعونا ندي على الفتية الأحرار في زمن أضحى به الحق بالقرآن.